All right, let's wrap up this imperialism with a little bit of Latin American imperialism. And really, when we look at Latin American imperialism, we got to focus on the U.S. here, okay? Because now, like I said before in the last video, the U.S. is starting to become a major player on the world stage post-Civil War, because now they're starting to expand themselves as well. And it really is going to catapult the U.S. into the 20th century and into World War I and World War II as well, okay? So, to kind of take it back a little bit of American history, after the War of 1812, which was between the British and the Americans, there was this great sense of nationalism in the United States, this national pride. Even though there wasn't a clear-cut winner, the U.S. really feels like they can be a dominant country as we move forward. So this nationalism is really spreading out throughout the United States. Even though we have internal problems, we still, on the global stage, feel that we're in a good place, okay? So because of that, we begin to establish ourselves, or want to establish ourselves, as a world power. And really, because we're separated from Europe and Asia on the western half of the Atlantic, we can really control that section of the world, and that's really the goal that they're going to have. So what's going to happen in 1823? President James Monroe is going to issue a document as he's speaking to Congress that says, basically, in a very small paragraph, Latin America is hands off to Europe. Don't even bother coming over here, okay? We're going to act as a country in control of these third world countries and really dictate who and what can be here. Now, this is a slap in the face right at Spain, because Spain had been here, but really it's the Americans asserting themselves and their dominance now, or beginning to assert their dominance as a world player. And this is called the Monroe Doctrine. This is in 1823. And really, you know, it's a good 75 years before the U.S. can really look at itself on a greater stage, on a global stage, but really we're focusing on Latin America. Okay, so this is the Monroe Doctrine that really puts us in a good shape to start to be a protectorate over Latin America. Okay, so the U.S. would act as a protectorate. If you look at the word protectorate, it means protector over Latin American countries. And even though we are not necessarily going to colonize, by overseeing what they do and keeping influence, whether it be financial or military, this is imperialism. I mean, it is what it is. And plus, there's already a country there with Spain who's going to get pushed out. All right, so this very much is imperialism in Latin America. All right, so also during this time, as we move forward into the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, the U.S. went ahead and acquired Alaska for $7 million from Russia. This was in 1868. And it's considered Seward's folly, because the decision, or the treaty that had been signed with S.S. Seward, or William S. Seward, is to buy this chunk of land from Russia called Alaska that was really the great frontier. It was unknown wilderness, mountains, all right, rough seas. But what was up there was gold and oil. All right, for $7 million, we got a pretty good deal from Russia, and it expanded the reach of our country. We're also going to look at Hawaii, the island's about 3,000 miles west of California, as ports. And again, they have resources too, and they're their own kingdom, and we're just going to overtake them. The businessmen there are actually going to overthrow the Queen of Hawaii at the time, Queen Liliuokalani, and it's going to become a major naval outpost, hence the idea of putting naval ships in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which will be a point of contention in World War II. But it was a stopover before United States ships, naval ships, going from the west coast of the United States to Asia. All right. Now, obviously, the biggest country that doesn't like the fact that the U.S. is wanting control of Latin America is Spain, and to really kind of show themselves. And Spain's kind of on the way out. They're not as strong as they had once been, but they're trying to find a reason to reassert themselves. So what they're going to do is they're going to fight the United States. Okay, so Spain and the United States are going to go to war, and that's going to be called the Spanish-American War. Now, I list only up there the year 1898. It does stretch into 1899, but it's about an 11-month war between these two countries, and really it isn't much of a contest. The Americans are going to whoop the Spanish all over the world, essentially, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and in the Pacific, in the Philippines, okay? So it really begins when the U.S. got involved for Cuba's bid for independence. We wanted to help them militarily. We're going to help them financially in the hopes that if Cuba does get their independence, then the kickbacks of resources and our influence on that country, which is only 90 miles off the coast of Florida, was going to be great. And of course, the Spanish don't like this idea, so they are going to act on it, okay? So when you look at the causes of the Spanish-American War, there's two really main causes. And the first one I want to mention is the second one here, the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. They're going to blow up one of our ships. Of course, the propaganda is going to be thrown out to the American people how the Spanish had attacked us, and it's going to get people interested in going to war. Okay? The other part is what is called yellow journalism. Okay? This false publications of not all the facts, and it's really run by two men, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, who are the two largest newspaper owners or businessmen in the country. And what they're going to do is essentially publish false stories that encourage support for the war. It's been said that if you give us pictures, we'll give you the war, and that's essentially what they did. They got Americans behind it, and if we pushed ourselves into war, and of course the Spanish were too weak, and we're going to absolutely dominate them. Okay? A big part of the Spanish-American War, which you need to start to understand, is Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt's huge in imperialism when it comes to American dominance. He is going to step away from his job as assistant director of the Navy, assistant administrator of the Navy, and go off to fight with a group of people called the Rough Riders in Cuba and in Puerto Rico, really in Cuba. And he's going to help defeat the Spanish there, okay? And then, of course, in the Pacific, it's the control of the Philippine Islands in the port of Manila, which is going to be huge, another stopping off point for the our naval bases and the Navy to move into the South China Sea and into China. So we're going to defeat the Spanish there, and it's going to be even less of a hassle. I mean, we're basically going to walk in and say, you can't stop us, and they don't. And this really asserts ourselves on a world stage because now we have defeated a major European power, albeit a smaller one. And we've got control of places in the Pacific and places like in the Caribbean, and now we can really oversee the entire formation of what is going to become Latin America and really exploit it for its resources. So when the war is over, we're going to get Guam, which is going to become a major island, especially during World War II for our Navy. We're going to have Puerto Rico, another island in the Caribbean that has major resources, again, close to our own borders, and then the Philippines as territories. Of course, we're going to lose the Philippines in their independence a year later. However, they're going to allow us to keep our naval bases there, so we still have that influence in the Philippines as we move forward. All right. In 1904, with Teddy Roosevelt as president, he's going to institute what is called the Roosevelt Corollary. And this is really taking the Monroe Doctrine to a super state. All right. And saying basically that, look, hey, we have protection over this area. But not only that, we're going to keep everyone out. We're going to be the policemen of Latin America. And in exchange for that, we're going to get the resources. Roosevelt, Taft, and Woodrow Wilson are all going to have policies that dictate us controlling Latin America for the next 20 years. And that's going to be a really, really big thing because one of the movements that Roosevelt is going to make with this Roosevelt Corollary is expanding American trade and quickening American trade. So what he's going to do is he's going to build the Panama Canal. Again, here is the U.S. acting as a policeman, helping a rebellious Panama break away from South America and Colombia. And because of American influence and the success of the Panamanian independence, they're going to give us the area to build the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal becomes a quicker route between the Atlantic and the Pacific. All right? And we're able to move goods much, much faster. We're able to move naval ships much, much faster. And now it gives us both control of the Atlantic and the Pacific much easier. And this really is imperialism for the Americans because now we are such a dominant global power that when 1914 does roll around and World War I does begin, we can actually stay out of it as isolationists, but we can still have influence on what's going on, and eventually by 1917, we will be in the war. And we're not going to watch this video right now. We'll watch this one in class. All right, so that's imperialism in a nutshell. Make sure you get this stuff taken care of so we can move on and get ready for World War I.